everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on Rash Pixel FM. I'm Pete Wright, and right over there is Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Oh, Nikki, it's the end of October,
It is.
And you know that gets my brain going about November.
Oh, well,
I know
that makes
you know
sense.
what's going on.
You
know what's going on in November, right?
Oh, it's the writing thing. It's the writing challenge. And it's also about beards.
Oh, yeah, no, I let that go.
Oh, okay, because you already have a beard.
Yeah, no,
so
no shave. It's no shave all year.
Okay.
No shave at all.
So am I right about the writing thing?
No, you are, but we try not to diminish it by calling it the writing thing. We call it National Novel Writing Month or NaNoWriMo.
I'm sorry.
And I am gearing up. I think I'm going to do it. Oh,
good.
And also my birthday. I forgot. That's good. Somebody had to remind me in the chat room that, in fact, November is Pete's birthday.
That's right.
And I'm gearing up toward, is it possible for me to just take a year off when it's my birthday? I think that's called retirement. And I'm not quite there yet, but it's on the horizon. AARP would like me to know through the junk mail that it's on the horizon.
Right.
Anyhow, NaNoWriMo gets me thinking about creativity and the way my brain works and the fireworks and the imposter syndrome and shame that comes with turning out crappy writing. And so I wanted to talk about creativity and ADHD. Specifically, how do you create through ADHD? And is there a better person to do it than the person we have on the show today? I don't think there is. I don't think there is a better person. Before we dig in, though, head over to TakeControlADHD.com and get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show there on the website or subscribe to the mailing list, and we'll send you an email each time a new show is released. And, of course, you can connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at TakeControlADHD. And if this show has ever, in your history of listening to it, in the last 10 years that it has existed, if it's ever touched you and changed the way that you work with your ADHD, that you live with your ADHD, that you experience your ADHD, we would encourage you, invite you even, to join the ADHD community at patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. And you can become one of the few, the proud, that actually watch our recordings of this show live. You can get special access to workshops that Nikki and I produce every single month. You get all of Nikki's forms and worksheets and checklists that we've talked about for years and years. They're all in one place, all for a few bucks a month. We encourage you to do that. Mostly, you're just helping to ensure the longevity of this show and the work that we do here. So again, patreon.com/the ADHD podcast to learn more. Okay, here we go. Dani Donovan is a designer and illustrator and is the voice and hand behind some of the most impactful comics explaining the ADHD experience. I came across Dani's work alongside millions of others when we discovered her storytelling flowchart and realized, oh my God, she nailed me. She's also the voice behind the Neurodiverse Squad on Twitter, a community of those seeking belonging and support through their ADHD experience and beyond. We're all here today to talk about the ADHD experience as a creative, both professionally and personally. And we're so lucky to have Dani here to share her experience today. Hello, Dani.
Hi there. How's it going?
Welcome.
So well. Glad to have you here. Let's start with the comics. Can we, for those who don't know your history, tell us a little bit of background about how you started applying your creative trade to the ADHD comics and the ADHD community. How did you decide, hey, I think I should be a voice for this stuff?
Well, the funny thing is that's absolutely not a thought that I had. I definitely fell into this by accident, which I think happens to a lot of people. I had started off just by, so I work full-time at Gallup, and I had a group of new coworkers, and I'd never talked about mental health in the workplace before. And they just kind of were opening up and talking about therapy pretty openly. And this was just a new experience for me. And I just kind of put myself out there and told them that I had ADHD, and they were cool about it. There wasn't any different. And so it kind of got us joking about, how I tell stories. And I decided to map it out as a joke. and sent it to one of my coworkers and didn't really have any intention of posting it because I hadn't disclosed to my boss who followed me on social media. And she thought that I found it somewhere and sent it to her.
Wow.
And then she was like, wait, you made this? And she's like, you have to post it. And so I had this moment where I had to decide, do I leave it saying ADHD or do I take that off and just have it be how other people tell stories and how I tell stories? And I'm like, well, I'm just going to post this on Twitter because nobody I know follows me on Twitter. So it's pretty safe that I'm not going to accidentally disclose to anybody by doing this. And so I just decided to leave it and to post it on Twitter, and pretty quickly was like, oh no. Like I had this double side of oh no, and oh, awesome. And so everybody in my world found out pretty quickly. So it was this big, I was coming out.
Unveiling. Yeah, right.
Guess what? And so I couldn't really put the cat back in the bag after that. And I did not realize how freeing it would be. I'm like, I should have done this forever ago. I can mention it now and talk about how it affects me. And so the first one I made was that flowchart, and the responses I got from people who had ADHD saying that the last little part that says apologize, to some people that's funny, and other people it's this is a kick in the gut. I always apologize for talking. And to have people tell me that really inspired me. Okay, well, I have to make more of these. And I started out the gate too high. I'm I have already peaked.
Well, I was going to ask about that. That's the storytelling is still forwarded all the time. It still has such traction. How do you go from there to? I just know that if I were in your shoes, I would have crumbled in paralysis, creative paralysis.
The thing that bothered me the most was that I had the thought that I should put a watermark on it, but I was that means I'm full of myself, and I think that people are going to steal this if I put a watermark. So I won't put a watermark. And then I did it, and then no one knows who made it.
Right.
And so eventually I made one with one, and it circulated, and people kind of found out. But I think maybe part of that, I convinced myself maybe part of that is good, because I did have to grow a little bit more organically. It wasn't I had this one-hit wonder kind of syndrome, because I didn't actually get big off of that first one.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, early on I knew I have to, in my head, be okay that all of my comics are not going to be this way. And that's okay. Maybe someday I'll hit it again out of the park. And I had that email like a boss one that one gets shared around too, but I learned to put watermarks on that one. So anyway, yeah, just kind of that paralysis of, oh no, have I peaked already? And then kind of making the decision of I can't care if that's the best thing, not the best thing, but if that's the most popular thing I ever made, because it was the, spark that started all of this. And if I hadn't gotten that kind of a huge response, I don't know if I would have felt so compelled to make more things.
Well, that's the thing, is that even just that one comic made, and I don't even know, like you said, is it a comic? I mean, I guess it is, but when some people feel that punch in the stomach, you touched so many people. And so many people related to that, which is a wonderful thing. When did that go out, time frame wise? I'm just curious.
I made it in December of 2018. So it hasn't quite been a year yet. Okay. Yeah.
Great.
It's just crazy.
Yeah. What a year you've had, I'm sure.
Well, because as a result of this, and as a result, I mean, of the kinds of people who have picked it up and who have shared that experience, you have become
a voice.
Quickly of how how? Like, how do you do ellipses? Like,
social media, really the knowing. So I was director of social media for AIG in Nebraska, on the volunteer board of directors for 3 years. And so I always had an interest in not just how social media works for like brands and companies, but kind of not in any kind of formal way, but just paying it, because I don't have a history. I didn't take, didn't go to school for it or anything, but paying attention to what types of things do well. And I've always posted like relatable content. I just didn't really have an audience for it. So now that people just see it more, and I'm like, it's funny to me because I've been posting this stuff for forever, and I'd be all excited, like, it got 2 likes. And so I'm doing the thing. What were we talking about? Social media. And so really finding that kind of platform, I guess, where for me, I never did a ton of research on ADHD. I didn't really talk about it. I honestly didn't really think about it too much, even though I'd been diagnosed for 10 years. And so for me, doing it almost as like art therapy, and publicly knowing that this is going to give me the feedback of reassurance that other people feel this way. Because I knew, even if it's only a few people, like someone else, this is going to connect with them. And so feeling like this double sense of like responsibility of like, okay, I haven't seen this kind of stuff before, and I know how much this would have meant to me if I would have seen this earlier. And then knowing like the process of coming up with this stuff is going to help me better understand myself. So it's, I do it first and foremost for me, I like to say, which sounds selfish, but I think it helps me to keep things really my experience. So I'm not telling people everybody with ADHD is like this. I like very purposely try to make sure that, especially my captions are, I feel this and this affects me like this, and not people with ADHD can struggle with this. Because I don't want people to feel like I'm speaking for everyone.
Well, that I think is the real gift of the comics and the way that your art sort of, well, sir, again, hits me. Because you say, I haven't seen anything like this. That my experience of looking at your pieces as they come across my feeds and subscriptions and things is, it's not that I've never seen anything like this. It's that, my God, I have lived this for so long. Like, it feels so attuned to my experience. And I think that's the real gift of your style, is the authenticity with which that you approach it. And so let's, can you walk us through your process, like how you actually come up with these things in a way that, I'll say with the ADHD caveat, that's clear?
There's some sort of rhyme and reason to it, to all the chaos. So I kind of again, the first one started from an inside joke. The other ones are just like things in my head that I think in metaphors a lot. I know a lot of people kind of have the tendency to do this, and it's just how I make sense of things. And so when I'm just throughout the course of a day, I tend to just notice like this weird hyper self-awareness that I have now of noticing when I do something and I'm like, I do that a lot. Other people don't do that a lot. Is that something that could be this? Is that something that could be ADHD? And I kind of like look it up a little bit to see if I'm like, yeah, no, for sure. But sometimes I do look it up to make sure it's not just a me thing, or I have bipolar 2 as well. And there's so much overlap. And so I always want to, if I can, try to make sure that it's something that other people with ADHD struggle with. And so, but before all that, if I just have an idea and if I am out oot and a boot. I have a Google note on my phone and I literally just type out like a sentence or two about what I'm thinking. And I have this gigantic note with tons of just random ideas, some of which don't make sense when I go back and find them weeks later. I'm like, what was I even talking about? But if I'm at home or I have the ability to, I have quite a few different like gridded notebooks, and I will just draw the sketchiest, messiest version just to capture, like idea capture. And so I have notebooks full of half-baked ideas and or very rough concepts. And I don't put the pressure on myself. Like if I draw it out right now, I need to like finish it today or finish it this week. I'm just like, I know I've got it down somewhere, so I won't forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then a lot of the stuff I've been coming up with, I had one recently with like about responsibilities, and it's got these little like dogs, and the ADHD dogs are just like taking naps and chasing butterflies and
Right.
floating away on balloons. That was actually the second thing I ever drew right after the storytelling flowchart.
And it's just been sitting.
And it just came out. Yeah. So sometimes when I'm like, I want to, but I do get the urge, like, I kind of want to make something, or it's been a while, and I'll just flip through my notebooks. I'm like, oh, I forgot about this one.
Yeah.
So then when I'm actually in the mood to like illustrate, I have this book full of things I could illustrate. And then when I'm in the mood to ideate, but not necessarily execute, I have this low pressure way of not needing to like make a final product. And so that in combination with not putting pressure on myself to stick to a schedule, that's been a huge thing. So I don't feel like I'm failing necessarily by not reaching goals, other than I want to make these and make it sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to come back to that, because you've used a number of times, like giving myself permission, feeling like I'm not failing, like low pressure. Very curious how you kind of navigate that. But before we get there, when you take, so I understand your capture process, which is, fantastic. It's just catching inspiration so you'll remember it later, and then brainstorming, kind of massaging these things into ideas. How do you decide when there's a project? Like, what is it about the dogs and the ADHD responsibility one where you decided this is one I'm going to create? This is one I've settled on, and I'm going to work on it until it's done.
Mm-hmm. That one in particular, I had to pick something for. I was doing a TV shoot for Lifetime for this Access Health thing, and they're like, "We need you to be making one." I'm like, "Oh, I gotta find one that's not going to take me that long." But I'd been wanting to, and a lot of them I get started and I don't finish. Surprise! And so I always am really striving to not do something I've already done, at least recently. And so making sure, like, is this a new perspective, or is this a way that might help someone look at something in a different light? And is this a topic that I haven't covered recently? And so the idea of having a hard time balancing responsibilities, I had done one recently about like prioritizing, which is kind of close, but not the exact same thing. So I've been trying to like touch on different topics, and I actually I got kind of stuck in a rut for like a month and a half, and I did feel guilty, like I need to be putting stuff out. I'm stuck. And I made myself a little like worksheet, right? And it says, oh, I should have brought it in here. I made a worksheet that's like a type of comic, and it's like bar chart, Venn diagram, comparison, this kind of stuff. And then below it, it's like topic, and I put like 20 different topics, and then I put audience, and it's, parents or teachers or people with ADHD or people without ADHD. And so sometimes I'll just literally just check a couple boxes and then see, okay, this is my parameters. What can I make in this? And it really forces me to push myself instead of necessarily waiting for inspiration to strike all the time.
That's a great idea.
That's helpful.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Because now it's like a challenge. I'm like, can I make a Venn diagram about, feelings?
Right.
And so,
Well, and that, here we are, and I'm looking at a Venn diagram about feelings. Two sides, same coin is exactly that. You kind of see the results of it. I look at, you've told us a little bit about how you released the first one, right? The one that started with the inside joke. But there is this last step of, you've captured your ideas, you've massaged them, you've worked on them until they're finished, and then you put it out in the world. And I sit here, I think about that, and you actually have a comic that I think about all the time, and it's the Getting Started comic, and it is on the left. It says, we've got a little character and standing on the top step of a set of stairs, and it says, "You need to stop procrastinating. You always make excuses. It's not that hard. Just do it. You're just lazy." And on the ADHD side, on the right, it's the same set of stairs, and they're very, very tall, and the poor little person can't even reach the stairs. Like that you can't, how do you even get started when they're on even the simplest of tasks if you can't even see the stairs you have to climb? And
the first step being so daunting.
Yeah. Right. The first step is huge. And so I look at that around, freeing your creative works into the world. Like what does that look like today when you're ready to push, publish, or send, or promote? Like, what does that look like?
I used to get in that kind of I think a lot of us tend to be very perfectionistic of like, I don't want to put this out there unless it's perfect, or I don't want to put something out there if I could make it better, or what if other people don't like it? What if it just needs more fine tuning? So early on, because I used to practice like calligraphy and stuff, and I had the same thing. And I would just post it as soon as I'm done with it. Don't give myself too much time to overthink it. Just get it out and move on to the next one. And so then for that, at least being able to see the progression of skill. And so for a lot of people, they go back and they delete a lot of old stuff, right? To pretend like they've always been good. And I just really like seeing that progression. So knowing that was kind of what got me away from being gun shy about posting stuff. But for me, I guess knowing when something's finalized. So my husband also has ADHD. And so a lot of times, especially before I had a Patreon set up or a Discord server or anything, I would show it to him and I wouldn't say anything. I usually post them with captions, but I would hand it to him, not say anything, and say, "What do you think of this? Or does this make sense?" And he's very supportive, and he's not critical just to be critical. But if there's something that's like the first storytelling flowchart, I had like a little cycle over here where you get kind of stuck, and he goes, "I got stuck over here and I didn't make it to the rest of the flowchart."
Right.
And so then I'm like, okay, I can totally see where that'd be confusing. And so then I showed him this one, and he's like, "Well, these colors kind of get, when they overlap, they kind of get messed up." So then I went and put little like space between, so you could see when something went back up, how it went like behind it, because there was a shadow over the underneath one of the arrows, so you could actually see it. And so then when I looked at it, I'm like, this is polished because I'm so close to it that sometimes I can't always see that stuff. And so he doesn't usually have feedback, but then when he does, it's really impactful, where he says, "I don't really get this." And if he doesn't get it right away, he's like, "It might just be me though. Maybe I'm too stupid to get it." Or the things that we say to ourselves, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm like, no, if you don't get it, someone else isn't going to get it. And so I'm not going to explain it. I'm going to go back and kind of fix it up and bring it back and say, "Does this make sense? Does this resonate?" So having a sounding board of also his ADHD looks completely different than mine. And so it's a nice test of like, does this work on other people, or is this just me? Because there are things that are just quirks that I have. And so now I have Patreon. I've got a group text with ADHD Alien and Jessica and Aaron, and sometimes we'll just bounce stuff back and forth. But I still, first and foremost, use my husband as a sounding board for if things are ready to post.
Right. So he's like the final gate.
Yeah, pretty much. Of like, if Josh doesn't get it, it's not good enough to post. So
well, lucky him.
Yeah. Right?
Does he know this? Does he know that he's taken up? Because that's an important safety tip.
Exactly. I'm like, no pressure.
Right. Right.
If this doesn't do well, it's your fault. No.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we talked about these are sort of the practical things, and that leads us into the more emotional stuff. Like when I know my accommodations practically when my brain won't let me settle down, long enough to manage my own tools, and that happens all the time. Because my ADHD is just fireworks. It's just straight all the time fireworks. I can sit very still, and I can look like I'm totally listening to everything going on in front of me, and I'm just not doing that. And so I understand when that happens, and I have accommodations. But the thing that I struggle with, and where my anxiety kind of it triggers in, is the emotional side. When I get stuck focusing on the things that I fear about creativity, the things like, I better not start typing because I know the first words out of my fingers will be garbage. I know that, like, those are the, like you said, the things we say about ourselves. How do you manage this second area when it comes to the work you're trying to create? And it doesn't even necessarily have to be the comics. We could be talking about your day job. Like, how do you manage the flow to actually get stuff out and get out of the way of your own creative maladjustments?
That's a great question. Okay. I have so many different answers, and I got to pick which ones.
Let's do a Venn diagram. Okay.
Pretty much. Right. I literally could just make a list, a bar chart. So one of the great things for working at Gallup is that we have the Clifton Strengths. And so it's a 34, it's an assessment where they it's not like one of the ones where it's like, you are an ENFP.
Right.
And it like puts you in a box that says, this is what you are. We've taken hundreds of thousands of people, or millions of people now, and rated these different strengths that we found. And they're in these different domains, right? And so I promise this relates back. I super promise.
Okay, we'll get there. I'll be patient.
I'm the storytelling flowchart lady,
yeah, right.
So I'll get there eventually. And so there's strategic thinking, executing, relationship building, and influencing. And influencing is pretty rare. And I have 4 out of my 5 top are influencing, which now makes sense to me, because I have a natural skill set that lends itself to like internet influencing. But my executing themes are all really low, which makes sense. Executive dysfunction.
Right.
So those are like focus, responsibility, discipline.
Yeah.
And I used to beat myself up about not being those things. And working at Gallup has really helped me to realize that you can't be everything. And so they give you the list of your strengths in the order. So some people have like a cutoff where you're like, okay, everything below this is not me. But oh my gosh, why was I talking about this? See, this is the part. Oh, okay. How do I use and execute? What was the question?
Yeah, getting over the emotional fears of creativity.
Yeah. And so I have found that, because I have maximizer in my top, which is like, I like to tweak things. I like things to be perfect. I don't want good. I want great.
Which seems like a real danger to actually shipping.
Yes, it is, especially in creativity, because it's not like math where you're like, I'm done. I got it. This is the right answer. Like, I've checked it. This works. I can move on.
I have to say something that I just noticed is, I love how you said you want it to be good, or no, what now I'm losing my train of thought.
You want it to be perfect?
I don't want it to be good. I want it to be great.
Yeah.
But you didn't use the word perfect.
Mm-hmm. That's why I had the whole thing where like perfection is a lie.
So
and it's so great that you can naturally say that. What a great example to our listeners that this can happen. I love that.
Yeah. Just understanding and being okay. The hardest thing for me is being okay with putting something out there when I feel like I could have done better. Because to me, it's like other people will know that I could have done better. Like other people are thinking, oh, she didn't try that hard on this or something. Like,
when they don't think that at all.
It's not true.
Right,
Nobody does that.
They're not thinking that at all.
And if they do, I'm not going to cuss, but you don't need that in your life. And so I have, between that and my comics, honestly, the biggest thing I could say is like putting constraints on things, which seems counterintuitive because it's like, I want everything, but like, and I don't want a tiny little box, but I need walls somewhere or I will not, my dad always says, land the plane, stop circling the airport. And so if I don't put any kind of walls, I'll just take up all of the time that I have trying to, tweak it. And so not that I would necessarily recommend procrastinating as a technique. And I think part of it's because I've gotten so used to it. When I was writing my talk for Anxiety Tech, I put all this pressure on myself where I'm like, I want this to be a TED Talk, like I want this to be this level of quality. I want people to like cry and walk away with a whole new perspective. And like, I know how I want people to feel, but I don't know what I want to say. And so that was a lot of pressure to put on myself. And I started like a month in advance. I'm so proud of myself. I had a schedule of like, I'm going to have the outline done by this day, and I'm going to have and I was sticking to it. And I got to the end and I finished 3/4 of it. And I go, I don't like this anymore. And so I started over. I literally wrote 15 either half speeches or full speeches. And I got to the end. I'm like, this isn't it. I don't like this.
Wow.
And it was like, oh, are you, it's not that big of a deal. I'm like, I will know it when I see it. And that's the whole issue with me is like, I know when I'm done because I'll sit back. I'm like, that's it. Right.
You feel it.
And yeah.
Right.
I know when it's done. And so what ended up happening was I started over again at the airport on the way to New York, and my flight got delayed 7 times. But it was okay because I was sitting there like writing and writing and writing.
Yeah, you get that adrenal boost, right?
Yeah, and then I did it on the plane. I finished it on the lift on the way to my hotel, and it was great. I finished, I go, this is exactly what I wanted. I'm very upset that I had so many meltdowns for this month because I was trying really hard to like give myself the time because they're always told like don't procrastinate, right? And in reality, like sometimes the time constraint makes me really efficient, and I do really well under pressure, and I need to like allow myself to have that be okay. Now in some instances that's a terrible idea because I knew if I can't make something on the plane, I still have a backup one that I'm not happy with. So that helps a little bit. But anyway, having some sort of, even at work, deadlines, actual real deadlines.
Is that, I mean, this use of constraints, I'm trying to put a frame around that because isn't that
constrain
ironic?
Around it.
Yeah, I'm trying to constrain constraints because I do that too. And I think that, in many ways, that's gotten me through a number of my most difficult sort of creative challenges is just like, eventually finding a way to wait till the last minute to do anything at all because of all the other emotional anxiety, like, oh, it's going to be garbage. I better not start. Eventually I have to start and it turns out fine. But I wonder if part of that constraint is a distraction from the emotional anxiety that allows me finally to push through and do some work.
I figured it out. Mostly, I would say figured it out. But every time I have like an emotional epiphany, I'm like, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have figured that out because now every time I do it, I'm going to know.
Yeah, right.
But for me, it was the same. I used to do a little bit of stand-up comedy in Omaha, just at like a open mic night kind of thing. And I would write all my content the day of. I would write it right before I went. I would practice it once or twice in the bathroom. I'd read most of it off my phone, but I do really well. And this guy, Dusty, who put it on, he had said, well, you really should hone and practice the jokes that get really good and put them together. And I'm like, well, if I did that, that would mean that I cared.
Yeah.
And that I like tried, right? Because for me, that and with my talk, I think mentally somewhere, if I leave it to the last minute, if I don't give myself a ton of time. If it doesn't go well, I don't blame myself as much.
Yep.
I say, well, that's okay. I didn't try that hard. Or like, I couldn't have had it perfect because I didn't, have enough time kind of a thing. And so I have like a built-in excuse if I fail.
Yep.
And usually I don't, but it brings me comfort that I will like somehow be less upset than if I worked on it worked on perfecting this set, worked and practiced and practiced and practiced, and then it didn't go well. That would break my heart.
Mhm.
So it's
This
like a
is
built-in coping mechanism,
truly
weird thing for me.
Oh, truly.
Yeah.
I call this one back pocketing success, right? I always have some conditions in my back pocket to pull out if something doesn't go well. And that's a terrible way to live, just as for myself. I don't want to speak for you, but it's a terrible way to live. And I really struggle with that. It's the idea of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. You know, like I could have gone so well, but I went ahead and defeated myself. And what I find so ironic about hearing you talk about it is these are the things you don't care about, and yet like you are de facto practicing and honing your skills in all of these things with every comic you release, right? I mean, you're better at it than you were even the day that you released the storytelling piece. And but I wonder, do you think about the comics in the same way that you've been thinking about, your stand-up career?
The stand-up career is not that was like a hobby. It was on my bucket list. I did it once.
You did. That's
I was good at it. So then I kept going. It's the same thing as with comics where I like making people laugh. It makes me feel good and valued. That dopamine rush is real. And so for me, I am very aware. I had a whole thing recently about how I'm competitive. I do like threads every once in a while now about why I'm competitive and how I think that I need to be excellent to be worth loving. And that pressure, has lessened a little bit with the comics because I just know people like my stuff. But the funny thing about the comics that I've realized is that I have always beaten myself up about not being able to keep up with passion projects. I start and quit so many passion projects. I wouldn't even want to make a list. It would make me sad. So, but this one, I immediately, as soon as I started making another one, my brain immediately goes, how long are you going to be able to keep this up? How long until you stop making these and disappoint everybody? Like now it's public, and how are you going to keep this up? You don't make time for things. And so this whole experience has been so great at like disproving that to myself and like really pushing myself out of that black or white thinking of how I should be doing things. And like, if I don't release a comic for a while, it doesn't mean that I don't make comics anymore. It doesn't mean that I have to feel guilty or apologize for it taking a while. I like to think that people would rather wait for quality than me pump out a bunch of stuff just to have stuff, because I want my collection. It's important to me that the collection of work can all stand on its own. And so I don't necessarily want that filler. And because I don't have it, and because honestly, the stuff that I'm making typically is so simple. It's flowcharts and Venn diagrams. It's just my handwriting on an iPad with some lines. And it doesn't take, once I have a concept down, it doesn't take very long to make. That storytelling flowchart probably took an hour and a half max. And some people, when I tell them that, they hate it. Jessica's like, do you know how long it takes me to make videos? But for me, how short I know it will take matters, because it's more difficult for me to fail, I guess, because even if one doesn't do that well, it's like, well, it was only 2 hours or it was only 4 hours, or it's not a month-long thing. And I have this history. I have a background in actual illustration. And there's a lot of people who don't know that I can actually draw real things.
Right. Well, and by that same token, I think it's super disingenuous to say that it only takes you an hour and a half to do that thing. I mean, you know what I mean? Like that's what people don't recognize is just the amount of fireworks and calorie burn that go on in your brain to get to that point where you can start drawing. And that's so much of what we exist to remind people of, right? It's just like you have no idea the ladder we had to build to make it to the first step.
Yes. Or the history, and because people are like, I just love how simple it is and how clean it is. I'm like, I have my major was visual communication and design.
Yeah, right.
So it was graphic design, but more than anything, it's that taking years of learning how to communicate with as few things as possible.
Mhm.
It is a skill that you have to hone. It's not something that necessarily comes naturally to a lot of people.
It only looks easy because of the thousands of hours that I've put into doing other things like this. That's the job. So,
and how many ruined, crumpled sketches there are of the same comic.
Right. Well, it's a fantastic work. And as we wrap up, would you please tell folks where they can go learn more about you and what you do and why you do it?
Yes. So my website, ADHDDD.com, is still under construction, which should surprise no one.
It's actually really funny because you have this clock on it, right? And the clock moves. And as I loaded it this morning, I had one of those ADHD moments where like it wasn't loading fast enough. And so the hand was like skipping minutes. And I thought, oh my God, that is such a cool thing. She's reminding me that I have ADHD by my inability to see time. And then it smoothed out. I was like, oh, it was just internet.
I had originally been the like under construction page, and now it says, I promise this will get finished eventually. It will. I have Q1 updates, but so my Patreon is the first place where all my comics get posted. Patreon.com/DaniDonovan, Dani Donovan. And all of my handles, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, is all just Dani Donovan. I stole all the usernames.
Are you were your parents big like comic book people? Or did you change your name to be a superhero name? Because you have the best one.
You really have a great name.
That's what Peter Shankford said.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
No, I got married a year ago and didn't change. I mean, my husband didn't care, but didn't change my last name.
No, he would.
That's just such a good name.
It's too good.
And then my Facebook, my Dani Donovan is my personal one. So Dani Donovan Art is what my Facebook is, but I typically it goes to Patreon first, and then Twitter, and then Instagram and Facebook when I remember it.
Do you want to plug the Neurodiverse Squad? What you're doing over on Twitter?
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, so we have it's just growing. It's been so much fun to watch it actually become a thing. I had originally kind of heard ADHD Tribe being used a lot, so I was using that, and then I had some members of the Native community reach out and say, I know you don't mean anything by this. We kind of hate when people do that. So I was like, okay, well, maybe there's a more inclusive way that we can recognize maybe not just ADHD, but people, on the autistic spectrum, people, with OCD. And so Neurodiverse Squad, especially on Twitter, it's conversations and questions and people just tagging articles and reading through other people's stuff. And so it's this great discovery element of finding people because if you search ADHD, a lot of the times you'll get people who have ADHD like in their handle. And so it can sometimes be harder to find journalists who are talking about it. People like me who just have my name as a username. And so being a part of that community and feeling that sense of belonging, and connecting with each other has made Twitter especially such a valuable resource. So I very much recommend people go check it out. Yeah. And that's what people were like, I hated this website, but this is like amazing. And so people had even kind of said that ADHD Twitter is blowing up. Like ADHD Twitter is becoming like a thing, a community of people, and especially people who didn't know they had ADHD, they see so many threads and so many comics now that resonate, and they go, wait a second.
Well, it's wonderful, and you are curating a wonderful space there, your contributions. It's just fantastic. Everybody go check out links in the show notes. Dani Donovan, let's try not to make this the last time we talk, huh? You're great.
Definitely not. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. It's great.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. We appreciate your time and your attention. On behalf of Dani Donovan and Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright. And we'll catch you next time right here on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.